Moonlight drips across Madrid's marble palace like molten silver. May 1936. A scholar stumbles, crimson staining his collar as the Star of Castile, diamond-crusted reliquary, gleams with unholy fire. One shot, then another. Two corpses cradle a secret older than Spain itself. Hidden passages breathe behind ancient tapestries. Jasmine-scented notes curl like incense. Hercule Poirot, gloved hand on ivory cane, voice soft as confession. Faith forgives. Stone remembers. Murder does both. Chapter 1. The Invitation. Hercule Poirot placed the morning's correspondence in 3 precise piles upon the walnut bureau: bills, invitations of no consequence, and matters demanding the attention of the little gray cells. The 3rd pile, this April morning in 1936, contained but a single item, an envelope of such heavy cream stock that it seemed almost to exhale opulence. He slit the seal with the silver knife that had once belonged to a grand duchess. Frumily, the wax wafer cracked, releasing a faint breath of bergamot. Within lay a card bordered in midnight blue, the ink a deep indigo that caught the gaslight like spilled sapphires. Grand Masquerade Vasa Palace, Stockholm. Le 10 avril. Baron Erik Lindström requests the honor of your presence at a soirée in celebration of the return of the Heart of the North Sapphire. Costume de rigueur. Discrétion absolute. Carriages at 9. Poirot read it twice, the second time aloud, rolling the final phrase upon his tongue as though tasting a new vintage. Discretion absolute, he repeated. Curious. He rose and crossed to the window of his Whitehaven mansion's flat. London lay beneath a drizzle so fine it resembled steam. Hansoms and motor taxis hissed along the wet asphalt. Yet his thoughts were already traveling northward, across the gray North Sea to the archipelago, where granite islands floated like dark whales. The Baron Lindström he knew by reputation only, a ship owner grown rich on iron ore, a collector whose passion for gems rivaled that of Maharajas. The Heart of the North was legendary, a stone of 47 carats, flawless save for a single inclusion shaped, some said, like a tiny polar bear. It had vanished from a St. Petersburg vault in 1917, resurfaced in Amsterdam in 1924, and now rested apparently in a Swedish palace. Poirot returned to his desk. He lifted the telephone, requested Stockholm information, and within moments was connected to the continental operator. A brief conversation in faultless French secured him a first-class sleeper on the Nord Express, departing the following evening. He replaced the receiver with the satisfied click of a man who has arranged the universe to his convenience. George, his valet, entered bearing coffee, and the morning's croissants, still warm from the baker in Shepherd Market. "You are traveling, sir?" "To Sweden, George. Pack the trunk with the gray spats and the new patent leather pumps. Also the crimson velvet cloak. I shall require a costume." George permitted himself the ghost of a smile. "May one inquire the nature of the occasion?" "A masquerade, mon ami, where every guest hides his face and doubtless his intentions." Left alone, Poirot sipped his coffee and considered motives. A sapphire worth 500,000 Swedish kroner did not parade itself before masked strangers without awakening cupidity. Yet the phrase "discretion absolute" suggested more than mere security. It hinted at secrets the guests themselves carried beneath their dominoes. He opened his pocketbook and made 3 neat entries. Who benefits if the sapphire vanishes? Who benefits if Baron Lindström does not survive the night? Why invite Hercule Poirot unless murder is already contemplated? The little gray cells, he reflected with complacency, were already at work. He finished his coffee, dabbed his mustaches with a napkin of Irish linen, and reached for his hat. There were inquiries to be made at the Swedish legation, a discreet word with a certain jeweler in Hatton Garden, who specialized in stones of dubious provenance, and, most pressing, a visit to his tailor in Savile Row. A Venetian doge required a cloak of crimson velvet lined with ermine, and the fitting must be perfect. Outside, the drizzle had thickened to proper English rain. Poirot raised his umbrella, its ferrule tapping a measured rhythm upon the pavement. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a sapphire blazed like a dark star, and beneath the masks of Stockholm, a murderer rehearsed his role. The game, as he was fond of observing, had begun. Chapter 2. The Guests Assemble. The Nord Express deposited Hercule Poirot at Stockholm Central Station precisely at 7:30 on the evening of the 18th, the hour when the northern sky still retained a porcelain pallor. A porter in braided livery relieved him of the valises containing the crimson velvet. Another, with the deference due to a first-class traveler, guided him to a waiting Daimler, whose bonnet bore the Lindström crest, a silver ship upon azure waves. Snow, fine as confectioner's sugar, drifted across the windscreen as they crossed the bridges toward Gamla Stan. The Vasa Palace rose upon the island of Blasieholmen like a wedding cake of pale stone, its pilasters and cornices picked out in gold leaf that caught the last light. Torches in iron sconces flared along the quay. Footmen in powdered wigs and sapphire livery stood at attention beneath a canopy of striped silk. Poirot descended, the cold striking through his astrakhan collar with the clean sharpness of a stiletto. He paused to survey the facade. 3 stories of symmetrical windows, each framing a rectangle of warmth and mystery. Somewhere within, the heart of the North awaited its audience. In the entrance hall, a major domo announced him with a voice that might have summoned Vikings to council. Monsieur Hercule Poirot. Heads turned behind their masks, fans fluttered like startled moths. Poirot surrendered his cloak, revealing the full splendor of the Venetian doge, crimson velvet slashed with gold, a doublet stiff with bullion, and a chain of office from which depended a single baroque pearl the size of a hazel nut. Upon his head rested a cap of maintenance trimmed with ermine tails. He had, he reflected with satisfaction, achieved the exact balance between magnificence and restraint. Baron Erik Lindström detached himself from a knot of guests and strode forward. He was a man built upon generous lines, shoulders like the prow of one of his own ore carriers, a beard of burnished copper, and eyes the color of glacier water. His costume was that of a medieval knight-errant, the breastplate chased with silver runes, a cloak of cloth of silver sweeping the marble. Only the mask, plain silver, molded to the features, preserved anonymity. Monsieur Poirot, your fame has crossed even the Baltic. Welcome to my poor house. The Baron's French was fluent, lightly accented with the sing-song of the North. Your house, mon baron, is a palace, and your hospitality, Poirot inclined his head, is worthy of a king. Lindström laughed, a sound like ice breaking on a river. Tonight we are all kings, or knaves. Come, let me present you. He led Poirot across the hall, where a fountain of champagne cascaded into a silver punch bowl carved in the likeness of a galleon. The air was scented with hothouse lilies and the faint metallic tang of the torches outside. Musicians upon a dais tuned violins, and a celesta whose notes hung like frost crystals. First came the Baroness Ingrid Lindström. She stood beside a malachite column, tall and slender as a birch, her gown of ice-blue satin falling in severe lines from a high collar of seed pearls. The mask was black lace, so fine it might have been spun by spiders, revealing only the lower part of a face pale and perfect as porcelain. Her hands, gloved in white, kid to the elbow, toyed with a fan of ostrich feathers dyed the same glacial blue. "My wife," said Lindström with a slight bow. The Baroness extended her hand. Poirot bowed over it, noting the faint tremor that belied the composure of her carriage. "Enchanté, madame. One hears that Stockholm in April is cruel, yet your presence proves the season mistaken." A smile touched the visible corners of her mouth. "You are gallant, monsieur, but April is treacherous. It smiles, then strikes." Her voice was low, almost husky, with the precision of one who has learned French at a Swiss finishing school. Near the fountain, a columbine in rose-pink taffeta pirouetted, her skirts billowing like petals. Bells tinkled at her wrists and ankles. She was laughing at something said by a Poirot, whose white blouse and trousers were of the finest silk, the pompons black jet. The Poirot's hands, Poirot observed, were never still. They fluttered like trapped birds. "My daughter Astrid," said Lindström, "and young Count Carl von Hagen. The boy fancies himself in love." There was a note in the Baron's voice. Amusement or warning? Astrid dropped a mocking curtsy. "Monsieur Poirot, Papa says you can read hearts as easily as palms. Tell me, shall I marry a prince or a pauper?" Poirot twinkled. "Mademoiselle, the little gray cells deal in probabilities, not prophecies. But a word of advice. Beware the man who hides behind a mask of tears." He glanced meaningfully at the Poirot, whose black pompons quivered. Across the salon, an imposing dowager in puce feathers and a gown of violet velvet held court beneath a chandelier that dripped bohemian crystal. Her mask was a half-visage of gold lace, revealing a beak of a nose and a mouth thin as a paper cut. She leaned upon an ebony cane topped with an amethyst the size of a walnut. "Countess von Hagen," murmured Lindström, "aunt to young Carl, and a collector rival to myself. She covets my sapphire the way a miser covets gold." The Countess's eyes, sharp as a goshawk's, fixed upon Poirot. "So you are the little Belgian. I have read of your exploits. Tell me, do you believe a stone can carry a curse?" "Madame, I believe only in motive, opportunity, and the psychology of the criminal. Curses are for those who lack imagination." She tapped her cane upon the parquet. "Then imagine this. The heart of the North vanished once before, in 1917. The woman who wore it that night was found with her throat cut in a Petrograd cellar. Coincidence? Perhaps, or perhaps a warning that beauty and greed are poor bedfellows." Lindström clapped Poirot upon the shoulder. "Enough of curses. Come, the other guests await." They passed a harlequin in parti-colored silks whose diamonds flashed with every gesture, yet who spoke not a word. A Cleopatra in lapis lazuli and gold leaf sipped champagne beside a Roman senator whose toga concealed the paunch of middle age. A figure in scarlet domino and tricorn, clearly a cardinal, argued theology with a Marie Antoinette, whose powdered wig rose a full 18 inches. And in the shadows near the great staircase, almost invisible against the dark paneling, stood a tall personage masked as death, black cloak, skull mask of porcelain, a scythe of painted cardboard slung across one shoulder. The figure did not move, Yet Poirot felt the weight of its regard. Lindstrom noticed the direction of his gaze. A guest who arrived late and gave no name. The invitation was addressed to Monsieur Lemort. A jest, perhaps. Or a signature, said Poirot softly. The Baron laughed again, but the sound was less robust. You detectives see murder in every shadow. Tonight is for pleasure. At 10 o'clock I unveil the sapphire. Until then, enjoy. He strode away to greet a late arrival. A woman in emerald silk, masked as Salome. 7 veils fluttering like green flames. Poirot accepted a glass of champagne from a passing footman and stationed himself beside a marble nymph, whose urn overflowed with white lilacs. From this vantage he observed the slow eddy of the guests. Astrid had drawn the Pierrot into a corner. Her bell-tinkling laughter rang out, but the young man's shoulders were hunched as though beneath a weight. The Baroness stood alone now, staring at a tapestry depicting the Judgment of Paris. Her fan moved slowly, rhythmically, like a metronome. The Countess had cornered the silent harlequin and was interrogating him with the persistence of a customs officer. Death remained motionless, a black exclamation mark against the gaiety. Poirot sipped his champagne. The bubbles were perfect, the wine vintage. Yet beneath the fragrance of lilies and the bright chatter, he detected another scent, faint, acrid, unmistakable to one who had stood in too many courtrooms. Fear. The orchestra struck up a waltz. Couples swept onto the floor, masks flashing beneath the chandeliers. Poirot set down his glass. Somewhere in this brilliant throng, a drama was unfolding, and the curtain had already risen. He adjusted the fall of his crimson sleeve, twirled one waxed mustache to a finer point, and prepared to play his part. The little gray cells, as always, were exquisitely awake. Chapter 3. The Sapphire Revealed. The great doors of the sapphire chamber opened precisely at 10 o'clock, as though governed by some invisible stage manager. 2 footmen in sapphire livery drew back the panels of gilded bronze, and the orchestra ceased upon a single, suspended note. A hush fell, broken only by the rustle of silk and the faint chiming of Astrid's bells, as she pressed forward with the others. Poirot, lingering at the rear of the throng, noted how the Baroness's gloved hand tightened upon her husband's arm. Lindstrom himself stood very straight, the silver mask catching the light like a mirror. He raised one gauntleted hand, and the guests parted before him as the Red Sea before Moses. The chamber beyond was smaller than the grand salon, yet more opulent. Walls paneled in lapis lazuli, a ceiling painted with constellations in gold leaf, and at the far end a dais of black marble veined with silver. Upon the dais rested a pedestal of the same stone, and upon the pedestal, beneath a bell jar of flawless crystal, lay the heart of the North. Even Poirot, who had seen the crown jewels and the Orloff diamond, felt the breath catch in his throat. The sapphire was not merely blue, it was the essence of midnight, a depth of color that seemed to swallow light and return it transformed. 47 carats, cut en cabochon to preserve its weight, it rested upon a cushion of white velvet like a sleeping eye. Within its heart floated the famous inclusion, a tiny silhouette that might indeed have been a polar bear, or perhaps a crouching man. Lindstrom's voice rang out, resonant with pride. Mesdames et messieurs, behold the heart of the North, mined in the Kiruna Hills, lost in the chaos of 1917, recovered by methods I shall not disclose. Tonight it is yours to admire. Tomorrow it returns to the vault beneath this palace, where even the rats wear combination locks. A ripple of laughter, quickly stifled. The Countess tapped her cane. A pretty speech, Eric, but stones have memories. Ask the last woman who wore it. Lindström's mask turned toward her. Superstition, madame. The stone is insured by Lloyd's for 500,000 kroner. Ghosts do not file claims. Astrid clapped her hands. Papa, may I hold it, just for a moment? Impossible, my dove. The jar is sealed, the pedestal wired to an alarm. Even I cannot open it without my major domo and 2 guards. He gestured, and Poirot saw for the first time the discreet figures stationed at each corner of the dais. Footmen no longer, but plain-clothes detectives, their evening dress unable to conceal the bulge beneath the left armpit. The Baron continued, You may approach in turn. Observe, but do not touch. The crystal is electrified. Touch it, and you will dance a different measure. A queue formed with the alacrity of children before a sweet shop window. Poirot joined it, content to wait. He watched faces as they leaned toward the sapphire. The Baroness's reflected in the bell jar, pale and intent. Astrid's parted lips, young Karl's eyes wide with something between awe and calculation. The Countess merely sniffed, as though the stone were a counterfeit. The silent harlequin passed so close that Poirot caught a whiff of bergamot, identical to the sealing wax of the invitation. Curious. When his own turn came, Poirot studied not only the sapphire, but its setting. The bell jar rested upon a circular brass plate. Beneath the plate, almost invisible, ran a hair-fine wire that disappeared into the pedestal. The pedestal itself stood upon a square of parquet, slightly darker than its surroundings, recently replaced, perhaps, to conceal the alarm mechanism. He bent closer. The inclusion within the stone resolved itself, not a bear, but the silhouette of a woman with arms outstretched, as though in supplication or warning. Magnificent, n'est-ce pas? Lindström had appeared at his elbow. Superbe. Yet one observes, mon baron, that the wire enters the pedestal at an angle. A vibration, say from a heavy footfall, might loosen the connection. Your alarm is perhaps not so infallible as you believe. Lindström's laugh was hearty. You comfort me, monsieur. If the great Poirot can find no flaw, then the stone is safe. They moved aside to allow Salome and her 7 veils to press forward. The woman's eyes glittered behind her mask of gold sequins. Her breath fogged the crystal momentarily. Poirot noticed that the Baron's gaze followed her with something more than hostly courtesy. At a signal from Lindström, the orchestra resumed, this time a stately pavane. The guests drifted back to the salon, the sapphire's image burning behind their eyelids like an after-image of the sun. Poirot lingered, ostensibly admiring a vitrine of smaller gems, a necklace of black pearls, a brooch shaped like a Viking ship. In reality, he watched the detectives. One remained by the dais. The other 2 followed the guests out, closing the doors behind them with a soft but final click. In the salon, champagne flowed anew. Astrid had captured the Pierrot again and was coaxing him into a corner beneath a palm. The Baroness stood apart, staring at nothing, her fan moving with the slow precision of a pendulum. The Countess had cornered the major domo and was demanding to know the combination of the vault. Death, the black-cloaked figure, had vanished entirely. Poirot accepted another glass. He had drunk barely a mouthful of the first, and circulated. He paused beside the Baroness. Madame, You are pensive. The sapphire troubles you? She started, as though waking from a dream. It is beautiful and dangerous. Eric bought it against my advice. He said it would be the crowning glory of his collection, but glory is a cold bedfellow. Yet you wear diamonds tonight that would ransom a principality. Her fingers flew to the clasp at her throat, a magnificent piece, 3 rows of stones culminating in a pendant drop. A wedding gift. Eric insisted I wear them. Insurance, he said, in case the sapphire should disappear. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A prudent man, your husband. Tell me, madame, does the vault beneath this palace open with a key, or a combination? Both. Eric carries the key upon his watch chain. The combination is known only to him and the major domo. She hesitated. Why do you ask? Because, madame, in my experience, a vault with 2 locks requires 2 thieves, or 1 murderer. Her fan snapped shut. You speak in riddles. Riddles, madame, are merely truths wearing dominoes. Across the room, Lindstrom was demonstrating to a cluster of guests how the alarm wire connected to a bell in the servants' hall. His laughter rang out, but Poirot noted that his eyes continually sought the Baroness, or perhaps Salome, who now danced with the silent harlequin, her veils drifting like green smoke. The clock upon the mantel struck the quarter. In 45 minutes, the masquerade would reach its climax, the final waltz before unmasking at midnight. Poirot set down his untouched champagne. He had seen enough. The sapphire was secure, for the moment. But the atmosphere of the palace had changed, as though a storm front moved invisibly across the polished floors. Fear, greed, and something darker threaded the laughter. He slipped into an alcove and consulted his pocket watch. 11:15. Time to prepare. He'd already memorized the layout of the palace from a discreet study of the invitation's reverse side. An architect's plan, ostensibly for carriage directions. The sapphire chamber lay at the end of a corridor lined with ancestors in armor. The vault was directly beneath, accessed by a staircase concealed behind a tapestry of the rape of the Sabines. The servant's bell for the alarm was in the butler's pantry, adjacent to the kitchen. Poirot twirled his mustache, satisfaction warming him more than the champagne. Somewhere in this glittering company, a plan was maturing. The little gray cells ticked like the mechanism of a Swiss watch. He stepped back into the salon, crimson cloak swirling, and took up a position beside the great staircase. The orchestra launched into a spirited gallop. Skirts flared, boots flashed. Astrid's bells chimed wildly as she spun past in the Pierrot's arms. The Baroness had vanished. Poirot caught a glimpse of ice-blue satin disappearing through a side door. Lindstrom, flushed with wine and triumph, clapped a Roman senator upon the back. 11:30. Poirot's eyes flicked to the chandelier above the dance floor. One of the crystal drops trembled, though no draught stirred the air. He smiled grimly. The game, as he had predicted, was well and truly afoot. Chapter 4. The lights go out. The orchestra had just swept into the third waltz of the set, a Strauss confection, all lilting violins and teasing cellos, when the chandeliers gave their first warning flicker. It was no more than a heartbeat's hesitation, the sort that might be blamed on a loose connection or a draft from the high windows. Poirot, stationed beside the marble balustrade, noted it only because he noted everything. The dancers swirled on, skirts belling, boots clicking upon the parquet in perfect 3/4 time. 11:33 by the ormolu clock above the mantel. The Baron led the floor with Salome of the Seven Veils, his silver mask thrown back now upon his copper hair, the better to laugh into her sequined face. Astrid and the Pierrot had vanished. Poirot had seen them slip behind a velvet portiere some minutes earlier. The Baroness had not returned from whatever errand had taken her through the side door. The Countess sat upon a gilt settee, fanning herself with slow, deliberate strokes, while the silent Harlequin stood behind her chair like a brightly colored sentinel. Death had not reappeared. 11:34. The chandeliers flickered again, more pronounced. A crystal drop chimed softly against its neighbor. Someone laughed, nervous, quickly stifled. The music hesitated, then recovered. Poirot's gaze traveled to the great double doors of the Sapphire chamber. They remained closed, the two plain-clothes men still at their posts, though one had stepped forward to peer into the salon, hand inside his coat. 11:35. The third flicker was a plunge. Every light in the palace died at once. Chandeliers, wall sconces, the fairy bulbs strung along the musicians' dais. Darkness swallowed the room entire, a blackness so profound that it seemed to have weight, pressing upon the ears like cotton wool. The orchestra's final chord fractured into dissonance. A bow scraped across strings with a sound like a scream. Then came the crash of glass, champagne flutes perhaps, or the great punch bowl. A woman's cry, high and piercing. Another voice, male, guttural, swearing in Swedish. Poirot did not move. He had marked his position exactly. 3 paces from the balustrade, 4 from the potted palm, 6 from the door to the servants' corridor. In the dark, he was blind, but memory served. He slipped one hand inside his doublet and closed fingers about the small electric torch he always carried, a precaution learned in the trenches of 1914. Before he could draw it, the shot came. A single report, sharp as a whip crack, muffled slightly by the press of bodies and the heavy hangings. It was not loud, yet in the absolute dark it seemed to explode inside the skull. A second woman screamed. Then silence, thick and stunned, broken only by the soft thud of something heavy striking the floor. Poirot's torch clicked on, a thin beam of white that cut the darkness like a scalpel. He swung it in a slow arc. The light caught a tableau of chaos, masks askew, mouths open, hands flung up as though to ward off the dark itself. The beam traveled lower and settled upon the Baron. Eric Lindstrom lay on his back before the doors of the Sapphire chamber, silver mask twisted half away from his face. His cloth of silver cloak had fallen open like the wings of a slain swan. In the center of his breast, just above the heart, a small dark hole had appeared in the metallic fabric. Beneath it, blood welled with the steady pulse of a fountain. His right hand still clutched the stem of a broken champagne flute. The bowl lay shattered beside him, shards glittering like frost. The torch beam trembled, not from Poirot's hand, which was steady, but from the shaking of the plain-clothes man who had lunged forward. The second detective was already shouting for lights, his voice cracking with panic. Somewhere in the darkness, a door opened and closed with a soft click. Poirot knelt. The Baron's eyes stared upward, glacier blue, no longer but filmed with the dullness of death. Poirot touched the carotid. No pulse. He noted the angle of the wound, downward, slightly to the left, the bullet having entered just beneath the sternum. Close range. Less than 3 feet. The powder burns were visible even in the torchlight, black specks upon the silver cloth. "Stand back." Inspector Ericsson's voice, Poirot recognized it from a brief introduction earlier, boomed from the salon entrance. Footmen with storm lanterns burst through, their yellow pools of light pushing back the dark. The chandeliers flickered once, twice, then blazed into full brilliance as though nothing had occurred. The scene revealed was pandemonium, frozen into stillness. Guests stood in attitudes of arrested motion. Salome with one hand to her throat, veils clutched in the other. The Roman senator half-crouched as though to spring, Marie Antoinette's powdered wig askew, revealing a bald pate beneath. The Countess remained seated, fan motionless, eyes glittering behind her gold lace mask. The Harlequin had vanished. Most telling of all, the pedestal in the sapphire chamber stood empty. The bell jar lay upon its side, intact but open, the brass plate beneath it twisted as though wrenched by main force. The white velvet cushion bore only the faint indentation of the sapphire's weight. The heart of the North was gone. Astrid's voice rose in a wail. "Papa!" She pushed through the press, rose-pink skirts catching on a spur of broken crystal. The Pierrot, young Karl, followed, white silk stained with champagne, face chalk white beneath the black pompons. He dropped to his knees beside the body, hands hovering as though afraid to touch. The Baroness appeared in the doorway from the side corridor, ice-blue gown immaculate, black lace mask in place. She took in the scene with one sweeping glance, then swayed. Poirot caught her before she fell. Her body was rigid, every muscle locked. "He is dead," Poirot said quietly. "Shot through the heart, the sapphire taken." Her lips moved soundlessly. Then, with astonishing composure, "The lights. I was in the powder room. I heard nothing until the scream." Inspector Ericsson shouldered through, coat flapping, revolver in hand. He took command with the blunt efficiency of a man who preferred burglary to murder. "No one leaves the palace. Seals on every door. You," pointing to a footman, "telephone the yard. You," to the musicians, "stay exactly where you are." His gaze fell upon Poirot. "Monsieur, you will assist?" "Naturally." Poirot released the Baroness to a hovering maid. "But first, observe." He pointed to the floor near the body. A single pearl, perfect the size of a pea, lay upon the parquet, attached to a fragment of gold wire. Nearby, a scrap of black lace, torn and trailing threads. And upon the pedestal where the bell jar had rested, a smear of crimson. Fresh blood, still wet. Ericsson barked orders. The plainclothesmen began herding guests into the grand salon. Poirot lingered, torch now extinguished, eyes cataloging details with the precision of a surveyor. The shot had been fired from the left of the pedestal, powder burns on that side. The bell jar had been lifted, not smashed, no glass upon the floor. The alarm wire had been cut cleanly with a sharp instrument, the ends curled like question marks. And the Baron's own pistol, Poirot had noticed the bulge beneath the cloak earlier, was missing from its holster. He straightened. The darkness had lasted no more than 90 seconds. He had counted the beats of his pulse. In that time, someone had shot the Baron, opened a sealed and electrified case, removed a sapphire the size of a walnut, and vanished, all without disturbing the guards more than a few paces away. Impossible? No, merely improbable. And improbability to Hercule Poirot was merely truth wearing an unexpected mask. He turned to find Ericsson at his elbow, face the color of tallow. The vault, the inspector demanded. Untouched, I think. The thief did not need it. The stone was here. Poirot gestured toward the empty pedestal. But come, we must question while memory is fresh and lies are still forming. Together they stepped over the Baron's body. The blood had begun to spread, a dark lake reflecting the chandeliers like a mirror of garnets. Somewhere in the palace, a clock struck the half-hour, its chime muffled by snow against the windows. The masquerade was over. The unmasking had begun. Chapter 5. The Little Gray Cells. Inspector Eriksson established his headquarters in the library, a somber apartment of oak and crimson leather that smelled of pipe tobacco and old oaths. The snow had thickened during the small hours. It pressed against the tall windows like a living thing, muffling the world to a hush. A coal fire crackled in the grate, throwing long shadows that danced across the faces of the suspects as they were summoned one by one. Poirot sat in a wing chair to the right of the hearth, legs crossed, hands folded upon the head of his cane. He had removed the Venetian cap. His bald pate gleamed like an egg beneath the green-shaded lamp. Eriksson paced, boots thudding upon the Boccara rug. Between them, upon a low table, lay the meager harvest of the crime, the torn scrap of black lace, the single pearl on its gold wire, the severed alarm wire curled like a dead snake. The Baroness entered first. She had discarded the ice-blue gown for a severe garment of black fail, the high collar fastened with a diamond clasp Poirot remembered. The black lace mask was gone. Grief had etched fine lines about her mouth, yet her eyes were dry and very bright. Eriksson began bluntly. "Madame, where were you when the lights failed?" "In the powder room off the west corridor. I had torn my hem upon a spur of the Roman senator's caliga. A maid was pinning it." "Name?" "Greta. She will confirm." Poirot interjected softly. "Madame, the clasp at your throat. May I examine it?" She hesitated, then unfastened the magnificent piece. 3 rows of diamonds flashed like frost. The central pendant was a drop as large as a thrush's egg. Poirot turned it in his palm. The setting was heavy platinum, the claws thick. He pressed gently. Nothing yielded. "Superbe," he murmured. "Yet one observes that the pendant is slightly askew. A repair, perhaps?" "A stone worked loose last week. Eric insisted I wear it regardless." Her voice was steady, but the pulse at her throat beat like a trapped bird. Eriksson dismissed her with a nod. She swept out, skirts whispering. Astrid came next, supported by young Carl von Hagen. The rose-pink columbine was crumpled and tear-stained. Bells had been cut from her wrists, leaving red wheels. She sank into a chair as though her legs would no longer hold her. "Papa, Papa." The word dissolved into a sob. Carl patted her shoulder awkwardly. "She was with me, Inspector, behind the portiere near the musician's dais. We wish to be private." Eriksson's brows rose. "In darkness? Convenient." Astrid lifted her head. "The lights were still on when we slipped away. We heard the shot. I ran out at once." Poirot leaned forward. "Mademoiselle, the Baron opposed your marriage?" Carl flushed beneath the remnants of white grease paint. "He called me a fortune hunter, said Astrid would marry a man with ships, not debts." "And you, Monsieur le Comte, where is your pistol?" Carl's hand flew to his breast. "I carry no weapon. I am not my uncle's keeper." The Countess entered unannounced, cane tapping like a judge's gavel. She had exchanged puce feathers for a gown of black bombazine, the gold lace mask replaced by one of plain velvet. Her eyes were red-rimmed but sharp. "Enough of this farce," she declared. "My nephew is a fool, not a murderer. Eric Lindstrom was a vulgar upstart who bought his way into society with ore and sapphires. Someone has done the world a service." Ericsson bristled. "Madame, the law does not recognize services rendered by bullets." Poirot twirled his mustache. "Countess, you coveted the sapphire. You spoke of its curse. Did you perhaps decide to exorcise it, permanently?" She laughed, a sound like breaking icicles. "I am 73, monsieur. My hands shake too much to thread a needle, let alone fire a pistol in the dark. Besides, I was with the Dowager Princess of Denmark when the lights failed. She will vouch for me." The princess, when summoned, confirmed it with regal brevity. The countess sailed out. The silent harlequin proved to be a Monsieur Duval, attaché to the French legation. He spoke now, voice soft, accent Parisian. "I was near the punch bowl. I saw nothing. The darkness was absolute." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Yet you smelled bergamot, monsieur, the same scent as the sealing wax upon the Baron's invitation. Curious." Duval shrugged. "A popular cologne. Half the diplomatic corps wears it." Salome of the Seven Veils was revealed as Fru Elsa Bergman, an actress from the Royal Dramatic Theatre. She entered with the poise of one accustomed to entrances, emerald silk replaced by a simple wool dress. Her mask lay upon the table like a discarded skin. "I danced the last waltz with the Baron," she said calmly. "He was alive when the lights died. I felt the shot. Someone jostled me. Then the report. I smelled powder." Ericsson pounced. "You were closest to him." "I was one of many. In the dark, closeness is meaningless." Her gaze flicked to the Baroness's empty chair. "Ask rather who profited. The insurance, perhaps? Or a wife tired of rivalry?" The plainclothesmen reported, "Every external door and window barred from within, the snow undisturbed beneath them. The vault beneath the sapphire chamber was intact, combination untouched. The alarm bell in the butler's pantry had not rung. The wire had been cut before the bell jar was lifted. Dawn crept grayly across the snow. Ericsson slumped into a chair, rubbing his temples. A locked palace, a guarded room, a shot in the dark. The sapphire vanished. Mon Dieu, it is impossible. Poirot rose, stretching like a cat. Impossible, mon inspecteur. No, merely improbable. And improbability is the cradle of truth. He crossed to the fireplace and rang the bell. The major domo appeared, haggard. "The servants' register," Poirot demanded. "Every soul in the palace tonight." The list was long. Footmen, maids, cooks, the orchestra, the plainclothesmen, even the charcoal burner who fed the furnaces. Poirot ran a manicured finger down the columns, pausing at one name. "Greta Olsen, the maid who pinned Madame's hem. Bring her." Greta was a plump girl of 20, eyes swollen with weeping. She curtsied nervously. "Ja, Herr Inspector. I was with the Baroness in the powder room. She tore her dress at 11:25. I pinned it with 3 pins. Then the lights went out. We heard the scream and ran to the salon." Poirot's voice was gentle. "The pins, Froken, show me." She produced them from her apron pocket, 3 small steel pins, 1 bent. Poirot held the bent pin to the light. This one caught upon something harder than satin. Lace, perhaps? Black lace? Greta's eyes widened. I do not know." The inspector growled. "The scrap of lace found near the body. It is from the Baroness's mask." Poirot shook his head. "No. Observe the weave. The Baroness's mask was Brussels point. This is machine-made Valenciennes. Cheaper. A maid's mask, perhaps, for the servants also masqueraded below stairs. He turned to Eriksson. The palace is locked, yes, but not airtight. There is the dumb waiter from the kitchen to the Sapphire chamber, used to deliver refreshments, large enough for a sapphire, perhaps even a slim woman. Eriksson stared. You suggest the thief was a servant? I suggest nothing, I deduce. The lights failed because the main fuse was tampered with, in the cellar where the charcoal burner works. The alarm wire was cut with a tool from the electrician's kit, missing since yesterday. The shot was fired by the Baron's own pistol, removed earlier in the evening by someone who danced close to him. He paused, eyes glittering. But come, the little gray cells have arranged the facts. Let us test the arrangement. He led the way to the Sapphire chamber. The empty pedestal mocked them beneath the morning light. Poirot knelt, examining the parquet. Observe, the square of darker wood is not new. It is polished with the rest, but beneath the pedestal, a faint scratch. The bell jar was not lifted. It was slid aside upon its brass plate. The wire was cut first, then the jar moved. The thief knew the mechanism intimately. Eriksson scratched his head. But the guards were watching the door, not the floor. In darkness, a figure crawling upon hands and knees is invisible. Poirot straightened. One more thing, the blood upon the pedestal. Not the Baron's. He fell 10 feet away. Whose then? He turned as the Baroness re-entered, summoned by a footman. Her face was ashen. Madam, Poirot said softly, your left hand, the glove. May I? She stripped it off. Beneath, a small cut marred the ball of the thumb, crusted with dried blood. I caught it upon a pin, she whispered, or upon the claw setting of the sapphire as you palmed it from its cushion. Silence crashed like a wave. Poirot's voice was almost regretful. You danced the final waltz with your husband, madame. You removed his pistol during the turn. You are left-handed, he would not notice. When the lights died, arranged by your accomplice below stairs, you fired. In the confusion, you slid the bell jar, seized the stone, and concealed it within the hollow pendant of your clasp. The cut was unfortunate, but the diamond concealed the blood. The Baroness swayed. You cannot prove. I can. The pendant is hollow. See? He pressed a concealed spring. The great drop opened like a locket. Within, wrapped in cotton wool, lay the heart of the north, dark and accusing. Eriksson lunged forward with handcuffs. The Baroness did not resist. Her eyes, dry until then, filled with tears that spilled like melting ice. Eric planned to leave me, she said dully. For her. A glance toward the door where Elsa Bergman stood, white-faced. The sapphire was my settlement. I only meant to take it. The shot was an accident. He moved at the wrong moment. Poirot turned away. Outside, the snow had ceased. The sun struck fire from the icicles along the eaves. The little gray cells were silent, their work complete. Order, as always, had been restored from chaos. Chapter 6. The Masquerade. Unmasked. The sapphire chamber had been cleared of all but the essential, the pedestal, the bell jar now upright and empty, the dark stain upon the parquet where Baron Lindstrom had fallen. The chandeliers burned low, their crystal dimmed by the pale northern daylight that filtered through high windows. Snow slid from the eaves in soft thuds, like distant applause. Inspector Eriksson had stationed constables at every door. The guests, unmasked now, costumes discarded for morning black or traveling tweed, waited in the grand salon under the watchful eyes of plain-clothes-men. A hush lay upon the palace, the hush that follows violent death and precedes judgment. Poirot stood at the center of the chamber, crimson cloak folded neatly over one arm, the Venetian cap tucked beneath it. He had summoned them all, the Baroness, Astrid, young Karl, the Countess, Monsieur Duval. The Harlequin, Fru Bergman the actress, the major domo, and Greta the maid. Even the charcoal burner, soot still upon his boots, shuffled at the rear. Eriksson closed the doors with a soft finality. The click of the latch echoed like a gavel. Poirot began without preamble, his voice precise, carrying to the furthest corner. Mesdames et messieurs, the drama is ended. The curtain falls. Yet before the players depart, let us examine the roles they have performed, and the one who wrote the script. He turned to the pedestal. The heart of the North was not stolen by a phantom. It was taken by a hand that knew every secret of this room. Observe. He lifted the bell jar. Beneath the brass plate, the alarm wire lay severed, the ends bright where the cutter had bitten. Cut with a tool from the electrician's kit, missing since yesterday afternoon. Who had access to that kit? The major domo, the footman, the charcoal burner who tends the fuses in the cellar. The major domo paled. I locked the kit in the butler's pantry. Yet the key hangs upon a board with 20 others. A duplicate is simple. Poirot replaced the jar. Next, the lights. The main fuse was loosened, not broken, merely turned a quarter circle. In the dark, 90 seconds suffice for murder and theft, but the darkness was not accidental. Someone descended to the cellar during the evening, disguised perhaps as a servant. He beckoned Greta forward. The maid trembled, apron twisted in her hands. Fröken Olsen, you pinned the Baroness's hem at 11:25, yet the tear was in the flounce. Satin does not catch upon a Roman caliga unless deliberately held there. You tore the gown yourself, at Madame's instruction, to establish her absence from the salon. Greta burst into tears. She promised me 50 kroner, only to tear the dress and keep her 5 minutes. The Baroness stood motionless, face a mask of ice. Poirot continued. While Madame was absent, the final waltz began. She had danced earlier with the Baron, close enough to lift his pistol from its holster beneath the cloak. A lady's left hand is deft. A gentleman's attention is upon the music. He turned to Fru Bergman. You, Madame, danced the last waltz with the Baron. You felt the shot? The actress nodded. A jolt, as though someone pushed between us. Then the report. Precisely. The Baroness, returning through the side door, joined the edge of the floor. In the press of dancers, she was invisible. When the lights died, arranged by her accomplice below, she fired. The bullet entered downward because she is taller in her heels, and the Baron bent to hear her whispered excuse. Astrid gave a choked cry. Young Karl put an arm about her. His own face was stricken. Poirot's gaze swept them. The confusion was perfect. Madame slid the bell jar aside. The brass plate turns upon a hidden pivot, known to the Baron who designed it. She palmed the sapphire, cut her thumb upon the sharp claw of the setting, and dropped the stone into the hollow pendant of her diamond clasp. The blood upon the pedestal, hers. The scrap of lace? From the mask she tore off in the powder room and gave to Greta to discard. He opened his hand. The pearl on its gold wire gleamed. This came from the clasp's mechanism, a safety catch to prevent the pendant opening accidentally. It snapped when she forced the stone inside. Eriksson stepped forward, handcuffs ready. The Baroness lifted her chin. "Wait." Her voice was steady. "Let me speak the epilogue." She faced the assembly. Eric was leaving me, for her. A glance at Fru Bergman, who did not flinch. The sapphire was to be my settlement, 500,000 kroner. I meant only to take it after the unveiling, substitute a paste copy I had commissioned in Paris. But when Eric announced the insurance, I saw a better way. Widowhood would give me all, ships, houses, the stone itself. She laughed, a sound without mirth. I rehearsed for weeks. Greta loosened the fuse during supper. I lifted the pistol during the gallop. The shot was meant to miss, to create panic while I seized the stone. But Eric turned. He always turned at the wrong moment. Silence. Then the Countess spoke, voice dry as autumn leaves. "You have confessed, Ingrid. The law will do the rest." Poirot bowed slightly. "One detail remains. The charcoal burner. Your name?" The man shuffled forward. "Johan Larsson, sir." "You saw someone in the cellar?" "A woman, sir, in a maid's dress, but too tall. She gave me a gold coin to look away." Greta sobbed louder. The Baroness smiled faintly. Poor Greta. She believed the 50 kroner was for a torn hem. Eriksson snapped the cuffs upon the Baroness's wrists. She did not resist. As she passed Poirot, she paused. "You are clever, little man. But tell me, how did you know the pendant was hollow?" Poirot twinkled. "Madame, a clasp worth 50,000 kroner does not weigh as much as a blacksmith's hammer. When you unfastened it in the library, I felt the difference. The rest was elementary." She was led away. The doors closed behind her. Astrid sank to the floor, weeping. Karl knelt beside her. The Countess tapped her cane once, turned her back. Fru Bergman lit a cigarette with steady fingers and blew smoke toward the ceiling. Poirot addressed the room. "The masquerade is ended. The masks are discarded. Yet remember, every guest tonight wore 2 faces, one of silk or velvet, one of flesh. Some merely hid vanity or boredom. One hid murder." He gathered his cloak. "Inspector, the sapphire is returned to its vault?" "Under triple guard." "Bien. And the Baroness?" "To the cells. Trial in the spring." Poirot nodded. Outside, the snow had ceased. The sky was the color of the sapphire itself. He stepped into the corridor, footsteps echoing upon the marble. Behind him, the sapphire chamber stood empty, the pedestal a silent witness. The little gray cells, for once, were still. Justice had been served, though it left a bitter taste, like champagne gone flat. In the entrance hall, George waited with the valise. Poirot donned his astrakhan coat. "Home, sir?" "Home, George, via the Nord Express, and a small detour to Hatton Garden. I have a fancy for a new tie-pin, something modest, a single pearl, perhaps." George permitted himself a blink. "Very good, sir." The Daimler purred across the bridges. Stockholm lay pure and glistening beneath the winter sun, its secrets buried beneath fresh snow. Another mystery concluded, another mask removed. Yet Poirot, staring at the passing islands, felt the familiar stir of restlessness. Somewhere, a new invitation waited, sealed with strange wax, promising fresh intrigue. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The trial of Baroness Ingrid Lindström began on the 3rd of May, beneath a sky the color of watered steel. The Stockholm courthouse, a stern edifice of granite and iron, had not seen such crowds since the Kreuger scandal. Reporters jostled with society matrons. Newsboys hawked special editions headlined "Sapphire Widow" in letters an inch high. Poirot, arriving by the night train from Brussels, slipped through a side door and took his seat in the public gallery, a small figure in impeccable gray, anonymous among the fur stoles and Homburgs. The Baroness entered the dock with the same composure that had marked her arrest. Morning black had given way to a tailored suit of dove gray. The diamond clasp was gone, replaced by a single brooch of jet. She did not glance at the gallery, yet Poirot felt her awareness of him as keenly as a duelist feels the opponent's gaze. The prosecution unfolded its case with Swedish thoroughness. The pistol, registered to the Baron, bearing the Baroness's fingerprints upon the mother-of-pearl handle, the hollow pendant, its mechanism exposed to the jury like a conjurer's box. The testimony of Greta Olsen, tearful but resolute, the charcoal burner's identification of the tall maid in the cellar. The cut upon the Baroness's thumb had healed to a thin white scar, yet the blood upon the pedestal matched her type, AB negative, rare as the sapphire itself. Defense counsel, a silver-haired advocate named Bergstrom, argued accident. The shot fired in panic, the sapphire taken in the confusion to prevent its theft by another. He produced character witnesses, charity organizers, a Lutheran bishop, even the Dowager Princess of Denmark, who spoke of Ingrid Lindström's generosity, her devotion to the arts. Astrid, pale in navy wool, testified that her father had struck her mother the previous autumn. The bruise had faded, but the memory lingered. Poirot listened, hands folded upon his cane. The little gray cells reviewed the evidence with the detachment of a chess master studying a finished game. The Baroness had lied about the shot being accidental. She had rehearsed every step. Yet the jury, 9 men and 3 women, leaned forward when Bergstrom painted the portrait of a desperate wife betrayed. On the 5th day, Poirot was called. He took the stand with a slight bow to the bench. The prosecutor, a thin man with a voice like a file, asked, "Monsieur Poirot, you state that the accused planned the theft for weeks, yet she claims the pistol discharged by mischance. Which is truth?" Poirot twirled his mustache. "Monsieur, truth is not a matter of claim, but of geometry. The bullet entered at a downward angle of 22 degrees. The Baron was 6 feet 1 inch. The Baroness, in her evening slippers, 5 feet 9. For the shot to be accidental, the pistol must have been raised above her shoulder, an awkward posture for a waltz. No, she fired deliberately, though perhaps not to kill." A murmur rippled through the court. The Baroness's eyes met Poirot's for the first time. In them he read neither gratitude nor hatred, only the bleak recognition of a mind matched. The jury retired at 4 o'clock. They returned at 7 minutes past 6. The foreman, a ship's chandler with hands like hams, stood. "We find the defendant guilty of manslaughter, not murder, and guilty of theft." The Baroness swayed but did not fall. Sentence was deferred for reports. Bergstrom requested bail. The judge refused. As she was led away, she paused beside Poirot. "You could have destroyed me utterly," she said softly. "Why spare the worst charge?" Poirot regarded her with something close to pity. "Because, madame, murder requires intent. You intended theft and panic, not death. The little gray cells distinguish between the two. Justice is precise." She was gone. The courtroom emptied swiftly, reporters sprinting for telephones. Poirot lingered, watching dust motes dance in the last shaft of sunlight. Outside, Astrid waited beneath the portico, Carl von Hagen at her side. The girl's eyes were red but dry. "Monsieur, thank you. The sentence will be lighter, and the sapphire, Papa would have wanted me to have it one day." Poirot patted her hand. "Wear it when you are older, mademoiselle, and remember, beauty is a responsibility, not a right." He descended the steps. Inspector Eriksson waited beside a police car, collar turned up against the wind off the Baltic. "You return to London?" "Tonight, but first a small errand." Poirot produced a card. "The jeweler in Hatton Garden has set the pearl from the clasp into a tie-pin, a memento." Eriksson grunted. "You keep souvenirs now?" "Only of truths uncovered. The pearl is flawless, unlike the woman who wore it." They shook hands. The car bore Eriksson away. Poirot walked toward the Grand Hotel, footsteps crisp upon the cobbles. At the corner he paused beneath a street lamp and drew from his pocket a telegram newly delivered. "Urgent. Disappearance. Orient Express. Passenger vanished between Belgrade and Vinci. Come at once. Jap." Poirot's eyes gleamed. He folded the paper with care, placed it in his waistcoat, and signaled a porter for a cab. Another masquerade, another journey into darkness. The little gray cells stirred, already arranging the facts that were not yet facts.